Thank you very much, everybody, for your attention here, and thanks again to the panelists. I think that was a great thing, and there's a lot of aspects there that I think we can sort of pick up on, and I'm going to talk a little bit further on. So my name is Matt Hamilton. I'm a full stack developer with GovTech here in Barbados. There was a word that was used a lot on that panel, curiosity, which is quite fortuitous considering my talk is actually called From Curiosity to Creation. So I don't know if that was a subconscious thing that happened there, but that was very good. My aim in this talk is to hopefully inspire, encourage, empower people, data scientists, machine learning engineers, and AI developers kind of on their journey. Now, before I sort of start, I'm going to say the obvious thing here. It's probably pretty clear I am not originally from Barbados. I came here 4 years ago on the welcome stamp. And as we saw from the panelists, everybody's journey is very different. My journey outside of Barbados is going to be very different to people possibly inside Barbados, but I think there's a lot of parallels here and there's a lot of things we can learn here. So I'm hoping that people can take away something, no matter who you are, what your journey is, what you're doing, that hopefully there's something in this talk that you can take away. So like every good talk, I'm going to start with a bit of a story. And this story involves me and ultimately my dog on here. So I came here, like I said, 4 years ago. And about 3 years ago, I reached out to a mutual contact on Twitter and said, hey, you know, I should introduce myself. I'm here in Barbados and I'm interested in what you're doing with blockchain. I've got a background in blockchain and cryptocurrency. And I said it'd be great if we could sort of meet up and chat. And they replied back and said, yeah, great. Hey, by the way, there's this event coming on. This was on a Saturday. There's an event happening Tuesday, so a few days later, with a guy called Bill Tai, who's a Silicon Valley investor. And he runs a group called Acti, which is a group of philanthropists, artists, innovators, technologists, athletes that kind of get together and they have an event around different locations around the world. And they kind of get together and sort of brainstorm stuff and talk about things. And she said, well, hey, look, there's this event going on. Give me your WhatsApp. I'll get you an invite. You can come along. So I went along to this thing. It was the opening ceremony. It was at the new O2 hotel down on Dover Road. And they said, oh, by the way, you might be able to meet the Prime Minister. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. You know, I'm just here in Barbados. I've not met the Prime Minister before. I love Barbados. I love the fact that, you know, you get to meet so many people here. And sure enough, I got to meet Mia Motley, which was brilliant. I got chatting to her about South, of all things, which was great. And she likes lean and one chicken foot, if I remember rightly. So that was pretty cool. And, you know, I was chatting to a lot of people. Anyway, I found out that the next day, so this whole retreat that they do is many thousands of dollars, way beyond my budget and timescale and that. But I found out the next day that they were going to be down on the beach doing some surfing and some playing around and what have you. And, well, the beaches are free in Barbados. So I thought, OK, why not? I'll go down there. Now, some of you who have talked to before might know I've got what's called a Dutch cargo bike. It looks like, it describes, looks like a bike wound upon a wheelbarrow. And myself, my dog, and my paddleboard, we headed down that way. I actually got the location wrong. I thought they were going to be down in Miami Beach. So that's sort of more towards Enterprise there. And then headed back once I go back to Dover. And so I cycled down there. And it turned out that it was way too rough to go stand-up paddleboarding. And so I left the paddleboard there and I just took my dog and I was walking up and down the beach. Anyway, a woman walks up to me, oh, cute dog, starts fussing the dog. And we got chatting away. And I noticed on her top that she had the name of this event, Acti there. And I said to her, oh, so you were Acti, you were at the event last night. I didn't get a chance to meet you. We got chatting about that. She said, yeah. And she said, so, you know, what do you do? And I said, well, not much at the moment. I've just been taking a break because my wife had been ill and I was taking some time off of work to look after her. And but I'm thinking about getting back into something. I said, I used to work at Ripple, which is a cryptocurrency blockchain company, payments company. She said, oh, yeah, I know Ripple. And I said, and then before then, I was at IBM doing machine learning and AI developer relations. And she said, oh, cool. She said, I might have a job for you. What? She's still fussing the dog. And she said, yeah, she said, my name's Ileana. And she said, I'm the managing director of Accenture in Toronto. We have an incubator program, and we are working with a company that is trying to do machine learning on the blockchain, and they're looking for a DevRel. So the Venn diagram here of those three things, and I'm literally stood in the middle there on the beach with my dog. And I was like, well, that sounds pretty interesting. She says, well, let me contact them and see if they're interested. So she's got her phone up, and she's on LinkedIn chatting to the founder, fussing the dog, chatting on LinkedIn. And she says, yeah, they want to chat to you. And I was like, oh, fantastic. She said, you free for an interview tomorrow? I was like, okay, yeah, sure. So the next day I had an interview with them over Zoom, and got chatting to them. And, you know, they said, okay, well, let's, you know, let's chat. So this was like literally a couple of days after that. And she said, great, we want to hire you. Now, originally they were looking for a community manager, and this is a fairly new sort of startup they set up. And I said, okay, well, that's great, but I think you need a little bit more than just community management. You probably need somebody to actually look at the wider aspect of developer relations, about documentation, tutorials, all of that kind of stuff. And so I actually thought, okay, well, let's push this a bit and say, let's ask for more in a wider role. And yeah. I ended up getting hired. So they flew me up to, they're based in Toronto, and I went up to Toronto to meet the team and see what they're all about and learn a bit about the technology they're doing and get on the plans. Anyway, about this time, now a lot of these that I'm going to be talking about is all kind of random, what I call sort of random interactions. I describe my life as a whole series of random events that have to be fairly fortuitous, but hopefully throughout this talk, you'll find out that there's things you can do to help with that randomness, to put yourself in the way of that sort of fortune as it's going along. Anyway, about this time, a former colleague of mine was organizing an event back in London. He was now working, I previously worked with him at IBM. He was now working at Microsoft, and he said, hey, look, we're doing this event. We want to do something about AI. You know, would you come along and speak? So I said to this company, I said, hey guys, let me go along to London. They're like, okay, cool. You can go along to London and talk about our technology and our product. So I went over to London and was talking about the future of AI and saying about how the future of AI is decentralized. Bear in mind, this was the same week that Microsoft had just put $10 billion into OpenAI. I was basically sort of going there and basically saying, the model's all wrong. So yeah, but anyway, it worked. So I turned up there and did a talk there at that event, and as well as that, was talking about, you know, some basics about machine learning, things like supervised, unsupervised learning, classification. Again, dogs make another appearance back in here, talking about sort of difference, how you would classify dogs versus cats on a decentralized network. And yeah, it was a great event, and I got to meet up again with some of my former colleagues from IBM. So, and some of these faces will start to show up again in this talk. So Sean on the left there, Liam in the middle, who's the guy that now works at Microsoft, myself, and a colleague called Ali from also, well, I used to know from IBM as well, now working for a company called Filecoin. So I had no idea that day that, you know, things were going to take such a turn. I went down there onto the beach with my paddleboard and my dog, and randomly I ended up with a job. So happy accidents, random encounters. But if I hadn't gone down there, and if I hadn't thought, well, hey, the beach is free, there's going to be people down there, there's going to be interesting people to talk to, it wouldn't have happened, right? As they say, you miss every shot you don't take is a miss, right? So give it a shot and see. So I'm just going to rewind a little bit back in the in the history and kind of show you some of the other bits that kind of got me to that point, to Barbados, and also where I am now in that journey. So I started off, I did computer science at university in the UK, University of Bristol. And one day I met a guy in a lift, and he was, I knew him vaguely from class. And I said, what are you doing? And he said, well, I'm trying to sort out some new hosting for a server we've got. And again, this was 1999. And so at that time, really sort of the cloud as we know it now didn't really exist. You had physical servers in physical locations that you were physically responsible for. And so when it stopped working, you had to jump in the car and drive 3 hours and go and hit the reset button yourself or whatever. And he said, well, we should have a data center locally here. And I said, yeah, it just doesn't exist. I said, but you know, we've got that requirement as well. So well, let's start putting something together. And so we did, and we built a company. This is my colleagues and I actually, this is our second office actually. Although it looks like we're actually hanging from there. We're actually trying to put something up. I just realized from this angle, especially Astra on the right there, it looks like she's actually just dangling. But we built our own office there. Well, I say built, we decorated. But we also built a data center there in Bristol, and kind of built up what we were doing. Now, we were involved in building websites. We sort of curated ourselves as a web development agency, specifically working with local government agencies, a bit of digital transformation stuff. And we're using a programming language that nobody'd really heard of at that time called Python. At that time, you know, everybody was like, why are you using Python for web development? You know, there's a few people at like CERN splitting the atom that were using it and that. But again, fortuitously, we picked a language that's now, I think, the most popular programming language. I think it's overtaken JavaScript now. So kind of that's what we did. We built that, and we used a particular content management system called Plone. And you might have heard of things like WordPress and Drupal. Plone is kind of like a very similar kind of thing, a bit of a larger scale, bigger beast for that. But we started building that, but the community sort of didn't really exist, and we were sort of helping build the community for that piece of technology. To the point where about 10 or so years later, 2010, we hosted the annual developer conference for Plone in my city. We had 300 developers from 50 different countries, I think it was in the end, that came along. And we hosted that conference. And I got very well known within the community for helping to educate people, to inspire people to build things. And that all went very well. Then a while later, through the community, I ended up meeting a community member who was involved with building a health and nutrition and fitness tracking system. There's a wealthy lady in Los Angeles that basically wanted something that didn't exist, and she was willing to fund it. And so we started building this thing called Enquos. Now, this was before really Apple Health and Android, Samsung Health, that kind of thing. Fitbits were just about sort of coming out. And so we built something to allow you to track your nutrition, your fitness, your mood, all these kind of aspects of your life. And I was responsible for the mobile development team. We had some Android developers and some iOS developers, and we were kind of building this up. And I worked there for about 3 years. We were building this product up. But I got a call suddenly, Thanksgiving, 1 year, and sorry, we've run out of money. Everything shut down. Everybody gone. Everybody fired. You know, oops. Now, there was something that kind of came out of one of the previous comments from the panel here about, you know, not waiting too long, about getting going sooner. And they waited too long. They were waiting for perfection rather than getting something out there as soon as they could. Anyway, one of my previous colleagues from the web development agency, NetSite, he'd been mining Bitcoin. Remember I said we ran a data center? Well, we had some curious arrangement that actually we got free electricity in there. And anyway, he was running a Bitcoin mining rig in there, and he was getting into cryptocurrency, and he got sort of me into it. And anyway, he gave me a particular cryptocurrency called XRP, some of it as a sort of a thank you for letting him mine in the office or in the data center. He said, you know, it's not worth anything, but maybe one day you might be able to put a down payment on a car with it or something like that if, all goes well. And it was worth less than a cent at a time, each one of these things. And I said, oh, okay, cheers. Anyway, when the company shut down, Enquo shut down, I was like, well, what do I do now? I could, need to do something else. And I thought, well, I'll take this opportunity to try and, refresh my skills. Now, I mentioned we've been doing a lot of Python development. For Enquos, we did some what's called reactive programming, a thing called RxJava and PromiseKit, I think it was in Swift. Now, a programming language that's heavily based on that, Node.js framework within JavaScript. So I finally sort of buried the hatchet with JavaScript and thought, okay, let's actually learn it and do that. So anyway, I started building as a programming exercise a algorithmic trading bot. I knew nothing about trading. I knew nothing about finance. I thought, well, let's just try this thing and see what happens as a programming exercise. By the end of the day, it was making money. And I was like, oh, okay, holy shit. So let's keep pushing this. Now, this was the end of 2017, and the cryptocurrency market, there was a huge, great big rally going on. And I was like, well, this is fantastic. I don't need a job now. I can just let this thing do its thing, and it's just going to bring in the money, and one day I'll just be sat on my yacht, and well, hey. Anyway, end of 2017, start of 2018, everything came crashing down again. And my wife looked at me and she said, you've got to go get yourself a proper job. Otherwise, you're just going to sit here on the sofa in your underpants and piss me off, right? So, go and get yourself a proper job. Anyway, so I thought, proper job. Okay, what do I do? Again, completely fortuitously, on Twitter, I noticed a tweet by a guy who 10 years earlier I had met at one of the Python conferences, and he'd been. We were about at the end of the talks, and myself and my colleagues were about to leave and go get dinner, and he was sort of stood on his own outside, and I said, hey, you're from Bristol as well, aren't you? And he said, yeah. I said, you want to come join us for, you're doing anything? You want to come join us for dinner? He said, yeah, sure. So he came join us for dinner, got chatting away. I started following him on Twitter. He followed me. We sort of stayed a little bit in contact, but not a huge amount. One day he posts a photo of him walking his dog. You can see a theme here. If you take one thing away from this talk, get a dog. So he's walking his dog, and I see in the background my house. And I was like, okay. And I messaged him, and he says, yeah, I walk my dog in this park. And I was like, I live on that park too. And it turned out we both lived the opposite sides of the same park, and for 10 years, we'd both been walking our dogs, and we just hadn't intersected. So I said, okay, cool. And we got chatting, and I said, so what are you doing now then, 10 years later? He said, well, I worked with a startup database company that's just been bought by IBM, and we are looking to hire people. I said, okay, that's interesting. I said, I'm looking for a new job. And he said, well, why don't you come and interview? So I interviewed with them, and I ended up getting a job at IBM. Proper job, as about as proper job as you could get, right? Working for one of the world's largest IT companies. So my wife was happy. And after a while, I kind of mentioned on the panel, I'd originally been doing database work, and I then was talking to a colleague over coffee, and she said, hey, we've got this opening for a developer advocate within the IBM Cloud division. And I was like, well, what's a developer advocate do? And she said, well, they help developers learn, they showcase what our products do, and they work with them and enable them to build. And I was like, well, it's kind of like sort of community building and a bit about that. Yeah. I realized that it's kind of what I'd been doing already within the Python community for Plone, but now it had a job title. More importantly, it had a salary, right? So I was like, okay, fantastic, great. I can do this then. So I joined the IBM Cloud Developer Relations team. Now, one of the things we were talking about earlier was sort of barriers and sort of turning things around. So just a brief interlude on this, sort of 3 different barriers that you sometimes see. Sort of access. We talked about things like data sets. We talked about in the Caribbean, there's a lot of very specific problems that we're solving. It's like there are data sets out there. If you can't find something to work on, there are open data sets. It's the great thing about things like Zindi. There's challenges there. Visibility. We're a small island, but make everything visible, right? Share what you are doing, not just within your community, within the island, but it now can be seen globally, right? I want people to realize that, yes, we've got local problems to solve and local challenges, but we can also work globally. And confidence. Feeling unready, just get in and start. Find something, anything. It doesn't matter what. Just get in there, make that first step. We talked about commitment and continuity. I can't remember the exact term that was used, but not just kind of starting and say you're going to do something, but continue to do it and do it. So, you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. Just the one that builds something and showcases it for people to see, right? Because not everybody needs rocket scientist grade stuff. They've got a simple problem to solve that they don't necessarily have the skills themselves to solve, but maybe you do. Maybe you can solve it or help them solve it or work with somebody to solve it. So, launch as soon as you can, right? Get into it, do something, build it very quickly, get it out there. Don't sit and wait for perfection. So back at IBM, what was I doing there in this DevRel team? I started live streaming. I started live streaming coding sessions. Now, this was absolutely terrifying, right? You're on there, your screen is shared, anybody can see what you're doing. And I would actually literally have a stream going there. I ended up with this really cool setup where I could actually have this almost like light board that I could work in. This is all entirely virtual, but I would walk through code, talk about what I was doing. You would see everything I typed, my mistakes and everything. Now, from a developer advocacy point of view and developer relations point of view, that built an empathy with the developers, right? I'm not superhuman. I don't have all the answers, right? So don't look at me and go, hey, this guy knows everything. I couldn't possibly do that, right? No, 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 no. I tell you, ask any of the developers in this room, any of yourself, how much time do you spend Googling stuff or now asking ChatGPT stuff, right? We all do it. And one of the aspects that people have to battle a lot is this idea of imposter syndrome. Well, it can't possibly be me. I can't do it. Why am I here? Why am I stood up here? Remember that you have a certain area of knowledge. Other people have a certain area of knowledge. And when you look at this room here about everybody around, there's a huge wealth of knowledge. You think, well, I'm just one tiny little bit within that. But what you know, somebody else might not know, and vice versa, right? You never know what is there, what the knowledge is. So as I mentioned, I kind of took a weakness. I didn't know data science at all. I mentioned this earlier. I didn't know data science. I didn't have a statistics background or whatever. And I worked on the basis of, okay, as a developer, what do I need to know to be able to use machine learning in my projects and products and stuff that I'm doing? As I mentioned, what is regression? I looked at the documentation. They talk about, is this classification or regression or whatever? I don't even know what those words mean to start to answer that question. And regression from a software engineering point of view generally means there's a bug, whereas regression in statistics means you can draw a line through something, pretty much, right? So don't shoot me, data scientists. So I took a weakness and I turned it around. My idea was to say, okay, I don't know this. If I don't know this, there's other people out there that probably don't know this too. Let's learn together. Let's work together. Let's stream this live and see where we go. Well, where did it go? Well, I ended up working on a project called Quireless. So this was very similar to a hackathon. There was a project called Call for Code that IBM did. And every year it's a big global challenge to solve the big problems facing humanity, climate change, poverty, etc. Now, this was just as the lockdown had started. And one of the threads they added into this competition was around remote inclusion, society, learning, education, the kind of stuff that sort of breaks when you're no longer able to be in the same building as people. And so my daughter, again, scratching an itch that I had, my daughter went to school and was in a choir, but they couldn't sing and play because they were all remote. And if anybody has ever tried to play music together over Zoom, it just does not work. So I decided, okay, well, we're going to build something. So I built this thing, Quireless, that allows individuals to actually remotely collaborate together and sing. And it used AI to synchronize all of the individual parts. And this actually was taken forward and became an actual advert for IBM Cloud, which is what you were seeing here. And so I was advertising how IBM Cloud can actually do stuff. Now, what I was then able to do was to take elements of that project. So that was kind of a, I won't say a free time project. We got given some allocation of time within the company, but that bit wasn't sort of my day job within the company, so to speak. But I was able to take elements of that and turn it into my day job. So I was able to say, okay, we need a synchronization algorithm for wireless. So let's do that and then stream that live, use that as material for one of the sessions. So aligning audio files in Python, I was able to do that and demonstrate the services that IBM had to offer that might help that we could use and we could build upon, how we do this with IBM Cloud Functions and IBM Cloud Storage and things like that, right? So the great thing being is I was able to take a single event, so a single live stream session, and get multiple pieces of content out of it. So I could tweet ahead of time, hey, we're doing this session, come along and join in. I would do the session and record it. Then afterwards, I would have like a blog post, a long form blog post that I could publish. Here's on a site called Dev2. I would also have, I could tweet about it. Hey, this is what we did. This is what we learned. Come back and see. I had the actual physical recording of the session that I publish on YouTube. So that one event would then become about 5 or 6 pieces of content in various different medias that I was able to then build upon as part of my day job. Anyway, we went on and we won the UK finals. This is me and my colleagues here. And again, you might remember the top right there, that's Sean from one of the earlier photos that I then met up many years later. So we went on to the international finals and we came second place out of about 10,000 developers, right? Which was phenomenal. It was absolutely stunning. Anyway, I got a message out of the blue from a company called Ripple. They were involved in a cryptocurrency called XRP, the cryptocurrency that I'd been working on when I built this algorithmic trading bot. They'd heard about what I'd been doing because I'd been very vocal about it in the community about what I was building, and they could see it kind of on the blockchain. They had an opening for a head of developer relations, and they contacted me and said, hey, would you like to come and join us as head of developer relations? This is the welcome pack they sent me, in case anybody's wondering why I'm randomly showing it's a mug and coffee. I love coffee, by the way. So they sent me this welcome pack. I was very happy with that. And I joined Ripple from IBM. I had a perfectly good job at IBM. And that was quite a hard jump to make, actually, to say, okay, I'm going to leave this perfectly good job for another one. But I was like, okay, this is cool. I can do the stuff that I've been excited about, that I've been working on in the evenings, the algorithmic trading stuff, cryptocurrency stuff, and I can then take it into now be part of my day job. And again, this was kind of fortuitous because they only typically hired in San Francisco, but because of the lockdown, they were then hiring remotely. I was in the UK at the time, and I joined them. And during that time was actually when I moved to Barbados on the welcome stamp. That was actually after, that's a totally different story, after a few beers in a pub and drunkenly applied for the visa. And here I am 4 years later. But yeah. So I was working with Ripple and I continued live streaming, right? I was like, that worked pretty well at IBM. Let's continue that and take that forward. And I proposed to them we were going to do this live streaming sort of sessions. And their comms team were like, well, what are you going to talk about? Can you send us a script? And I said, well, there isn't a script. It's live. We're going to be talking about whatever happens. And we had, a live chat going on with the audience kind of coming in, chatting. I would sometimes have interviews with guests. Elliot was one of my colleagues, and we'd be sort of talking about stuff and doing it together. And so yeah, this kind of grew and became like quite a regular thing that I was doing, like live on Twitch, actually live streaming and broadcasting, from a little sort of studio type thing that I effectively built, some monitors, some lights, and that's actually plumbing pipe that I built a frame on to put these lights on that I built out of some wood and LED strips. Yeah, so building skills that matter. So again, I was sort of took the opportunity to learn things that I needed along the way. So whether that's, Python stuff, AI stuff, SQL, LLMs, whatever it might be. LLMs didn't really exist so much back then. But as well the human skills. And we're going back to this concept, curiosity. That is one of the biggest skills I would say you have. Asking why, how does this work? Learning about it as you go along. Communication, translating the data and the knowledge and that into stories. Again, we mentioned this on the panel. It's no good if nobody knows what's going on, right? You could be doing the best thing in the world, but whether that's your portfolio or your public work, people need to know. Collaboration, sharing the knowledge together with other people, working with other people. And resilience, iterating after failure, right? Doesn't matter if you bomb the bit about databases, right? Picking yourself up and saying, hey, look, I can go ahead and do this. Everybody on this panel talked about a time in which, something didn't work out well for them, or they failed, and how they turned that around and built forward. So kind of like in the age of AI, you could kind of say like curiosity is like the ultimate data set, right? Be curious, find what's out there. So I mentioned that I'd taken some time off. This goes back to about where I'd had the job. I mentioned a bit about BitTensor, which was the AI company, and the dog on the beach. After unfortunately, they had run out of money too, so that didn't last too long. But I got invited to come and interview with a company called Protocol Labs and a project called Filecoin. And again, familiar face, Ali there, you might remember, a former colleague from IBM. She contacted me and said, well, you'd probably be good for this role. Why don't you interview for it? So I interviewed for the role, and I got the job. This is us in Copenhagen, I think it was, kicking off a project called the Filecoin Virtual Machine, which is building a system to allow smart contracts on the Filecoin blockchain. And we were sort of all got together to build that. And I continued live streaming as well. So working with a colleague of mine, Sarah, every week we would do a live stream. Every single week. We picked one day. I mean, actually, over all of these 3 companies I was doing this live streaming for, I think I actually kept the same day and same time, even across all of them, just out of convenience for me. But people knew that you would be there at that time and they would show up, right? Consistency. That's the term I was trying to think of earlier. Consistency, as mentioned here on the panel, be there and people will start to come along. And I got to go to conferences and expos. This was, I think, Lisbon. Low battery, so okay, well, we'll see how we get on there. I spoke on stage at Consensus. That's your 40-foot stage in Austin, and Bangalore. I was in India doing a workshop there. So I got to travel around to do that, which was absolutely fantastic. I joined a project after that called Arbitrum, which was a Ethereum-based project. And again, similar kind of thing, got to move around, go to shows, present at events there, including even event. So this was a remote one, but a group called Web3 Wari in Nigeria invited me to come and speak remotely to what they were doing there. Unfortunately, I never got a chance to actually go there to Nigeria. I'd love to experience that someday. So, scratch your own itch. Build what you wish existed, right? People talk about inspiration and how, what it is that inspires you to keep going. Some of you who you might have seen or I've spoken to, there's a couple of projects I've been working on. One was called We Outside, and We Outside was all because I couldn't find where all the local fets and events were, right? Yeah. So unless you followed the right people on Instagram, you wouldn't know where they are. Now, being somebody not from Barbados, I didn't know who to follow, right? And my timeline is curated algorithmically from somebody who is not from Barbados, right? So if you're a visitor to Barbados, you open up Instagram, you're not going to see the same stuff as somebody here when they open Instagram and they're following the various presenters, DJs, influencers, etc. So this was a autonomous AI agent that I built that trawls around Instagram, finds all the event posters, finds out, okay, is this a cruise? Is it a Lime? Make sure it's in Barbados and not in wherever, St. Lucia or whatever. And we'll pick out all of the pertinent details from the posters and present it all in one place. So you can go in there, you can see that. So that was a like I said, an itch that I had that I scratched, and did that and released it. So that's running live. A more recent one that I just launched is called "You're Getting Through," and how do you find homewares and DIY stuff in Barbados? I was looking for something, I can't remember what it was, a shelf bracket or something, and I looked and I couldn't find. If you've ever tried using Koeman's website to search, that's a search for table saw. It's come back with Gorilla Tape, spray paint, and a cheesecloth. Right? If anybody here works for Koeman, please, what? Anyway, so I created something that deals with that. It scrapes the product information from Koeman, Carter's, Do It Best, H&B, Marshalls. There's about 100, just over 100,000 products on there. And well, when you search for table saw, you get a table saw. But even better is it uses AI to actually analyze both the descriptions and the images in there. So say you've got something like a curtain rail, it'll be like, well, it looks at the picture and it's like, well, okay, it's a curtain rail, but it's a chrome curtain rail. And the description might say it's from this length to this length, it's 36 to 48 inches. And you're like, well, I want a 40-inch one, or whatever that is in centimeters. Typically, a traditional search wouldn't find it. Whereas this is able to use AI and go, well, you want a 40-inch one? Well, we've got one here that goes from 36 to 48 inches. So that will work for you because that's within that range. And it tells you at the bottom, why this matches. It tells you when you do a search, it tells you why it matches. So again, that was scratching an itch that I had. I did this last week. Yeah. Again, rapid iteration, quick. It's not perfect. It's not updating necessarily at the moment, but it's like, get it out there. Networking visibility, right? Get it out there, get people to see it, get them to test it, get them to have a go at it. So another project I created was called You Hear Them. And this was taking parliamentary transcripts and allowing you to search and effectively converse with them. So you're not going to sit down and necessarily, unless you're very dedicated, sit down there and watch a 4-hour parliamentary transcript that happens every few days. So I wrote a system that takes them all, ingests them, allows you to search them. So you can ask, what has been mentioned about funding of football in schools, for example, and it will then find you not just what has been said, but the video on YouTube and the exact moment that is discussed. And it's all based upon a knowledge graph in which it has semantic understanding of what something is. So water controversy is a thing, and it's related to water resource management, related to water storage. So I built that, and then I tweeted about it. Some other people mentioned it, said, hey, this is pretty cool. And I suddenly got a message from a guy called Jonathan Reed. I was like, I don't know who this is. Jonathan Reed, the Minister of Innovation in Barbados. I've just had a message from Minister of Barbados. And he says, hey, this is really cool. We should try and work out a way to collaborate. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's cool. And he said, I'll get you in touch with a guy called Mark Boyce. Dun, dun, dun. And I am now part of the GovTech team that Mark is running. Thank you. That Mark is leading. And we are trying to do digital transformation here in Barbados in a very public, very visible, very agile way. Our first release was 8 days. It took us to build the first release of alpha.gov.bb. Now, it's very small, but it was a start. And then every about 2 weeks, we're doing a release. We're iterating as we're going along. One of our biggest challenges is trying to explain that process to a wider general public who might look at it and go, well, you've done services A and B, but what about C, D, E, F, and G? And we've got to try and explain to them, or Aisha's got to try and explain to them, as our head of comms. Unfortunately missing, I think that's mainly the dev team there, I think that's why. Aisha's our head of comms as to how that is, right? And so we were working, there was a mention about, on the panel here, about finding out about the people behind the data. We actually got the ministries in and worked with them about creating a whole bunch of post-it notes and what are the problems that they actually have, and we sort of iterated from there. Learning by doing, collaboration, working with them, as was mentioned earlier on the panel. And accumulating this was actually last night. I was very, very honored to receive an award from the Barbados Labour Party for innovation. So this is, thank you. So from Jerome Walcott, who, Dr. Jerome Walcott, who awarded me this. Now I'm still up there next to, the guy before me was an amputee Paralympian who's just like, and I'm like, I just type things. So very, very humbling experience. And a 7-year-old girl who stood up and said, hey, we need to do something about waste management. And her ideas, you know, got Mia's ear, it went through, and then is now part of the actual, you know, is actually being implemented now. So that's amazing, amazing stuff. So very humbling experience last night. So bringing this back, local opportunities, hackathons, the new data economy. So what can you do? So we've talked about Zindi and the hackathons that are there. Now, I'm actually just going to quickly grab my power just in case this runs out. If I could find where my bag went. 1 second. So that Yehirdim that I showed you was actually built for a hackathon. Not a Zindi hackathon, but a hackathon with another organization called DevPost. And again, this came about because my daughter, at the time, my eldest daughter back in the UK, she worked in tech support and she was concerned that her job was being taken over by AI. And she was seeing the amount of tickets she had to deal with less and less as they're bringing in AI agents to deal with it. And I said, well, you've got two choices. You can either let AI take your job or you can take AI's job, right? So I said, let's sit down and do this. And so every day for about half an hour, we went through and she'd done like a Python programming boot camp, so had some experience in Python, but nothing about AI. And she's got a background in education. She's got a master's in educational literacy. And so we sat down and worked together, me in Barbados, her back in the UK. And that's how we built Yehirdim, the thing that eventually was, you know, resulted in me standing here in front of you, right? So I called her yesterday. She's actually this weekend at her first in-person hackathon in the UK. And I called her and hopefully the sound, I did turn the sound up. Let's see if this.
So I do 100% encourage anyone and everyone to attend hackathons, especially if you have no idea what's going on in the tech world, because you are completely immersing yourself in this really scary industry that actually, as it turns out, isn't that scary at all. You are, well, I have learned so many new skills, not just within about tech, but even actually just how to navigate the tech world, the types of things to look out for. I gained so much more confidence in general. I've made so many creative projects that been in my brain for so long. And there's so many AI tools now where you can even vibe code, you don't have to know everything. And I love that all of these ideas I had in my head, I've now put them onto screen. It just makes me so happy to see that other people have now seen them. I've been able to share these creative ideas. I've been able to exceed my own expectations in terms of the tech capabilities. The interviewers kept saying they were just so impressed with all of these projects I was doing. And they kept asking me questions, and I never thought that I would ever be able to go into tech and talk to people about projects that I legitimately have so much passion for. These are things that I'm really interested in. And yeah, they were all so blown away and they were asking me these questions and I didn't answer the questions. I think that was what was most surprising. They were asking me technical questions, non-technical questions, but most of all, the feedback I got was how impressed they were that I just dove right in and I took the risk and I challenged myself. They said it doesn't even matter, you know, coding, for example, because they were just so impressed that I could even have those ideas and even expose myself to those technical spaces and just taking that big risk. And yeah, they were all just blown away. It's really cool.
So that was Katie there. What I should have said there, to set a little bit of context, is she just had an interview, the final interview with a company, and that was her response back. I called her and said, she said, I just had this interview. It went really, really well. I said, look, do you mind if I record this about your experiences doing a hackathon? And she was like, yeah. So I recorded that call. That was, I think, 2 days ago. What is a fantastic report is that she actually got the job, which was great. So for those asking about the portfolio and asking about what companies are looking for and that kind of thing, that was just an example there. So anyway, nearly done here, he says, as he locks his screen by accident. Let's move on here. Right. So hackathons, bring it local. GovTech Barbados, working with Zindi. There's a number of hackathons going on, things like the Barbados Traffic Analysis Challenge, which starts very soon. The Lands and Survey one that some of you may be familiar with that's just finished. There was the fraud detection one a little while back. And so these are challenges with real money attached to them, right? So these are a good way for people to kind of have a go, build up. And even if you don't win, you learn something. You're going through the process, you're learning something there as well. And these aren't just competitions, they're stepping stones into real careers. Using local data sets, local mentors, but global visibility. You could take one of these and to any company anywhere in the world and say, hey, look, I was involved in this, right? Just like Katie did about the company that she was interviewing with. So, if you want to break into data science, you want to advance yourself in data science, and if you're looking for careers in that, I'd say definitely, have a go on some of these, submit the entry, build your portfolio around some of these things. Coursera as well, that was also mentioned earlier, and things like the NTI, other fantastic resources. So, kind of closing it all up, the big thing I say is start where you are, right? We've got some fantastic resources here. Whether it's a random walk on the beach, get a dog, remember, get a dog. Or a late night idea that just won't leave your brain alone. Your curiosity, that is your compass. Use that curiosity. Remember, there's always something you can learn. There's always something you can teach as well, right? Whatever you know, somebody else might not know. So take that along. As I mentioned earlier, one of the things I do is if I can explain something to somebody else and they can understand it, then that means I understand it well myself. If I can't, then I don't. So start where you are, use what you have, build what you wish existed, and when you do, share it. Make sure people know about it, yell about it, put it online, make noise, right? So people can see it, so people can see that this stuff is happening here in Barbados, and you don't have to go off to this country or that country or whatever to do it, right? So don't wait for opportunity to knock on the door. Don't wait for that door to open, break down the door, build the door yourself, right? I mean, build your own door, right? So you can put yourself in the position. I describe my life as a whole series of random happy accidents, but you've got to put yourself in the position for them to happen. So do that and make a lot of noise about it. So, thank you. I don't know what. There's now questions. Is it? Yeah. Does anybody? Yeah.
I have a so really cool project. I think the ones that are specific to Caribbean.
Yeah.
Everyone here will be interested in. Now the parliamentary one, that's taking you to transcripts. Do you have difficulties having the AI understand some of the accent that's coming through?
That's a very good point. Yes. So the version that's live at the moment uses the transcripts as provided by YouTube itself. So it's using those transcripts. But the issue I had was, one, it got a few things wrong in there. It didn't know the local context, but also it didn't know the spellings of things. I mentioned Minister Reid. His name is spelled R-E-I-D, not R-E-E-D, right? And so it was misspelling his name when it was hearing it phonetically. There's a lot of names, but also there's some other specific things, not so much Caribbean specific, but parliamentary specific. You don't refer to each other in the parliament as Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so, but the Right Honourable Member for St. James, which has a very specific context, right? So this second version I'm working on, it's still not live yet. I got a bit distracted with this whole GovTech and let's try and fix Barbados thing. Yeah, we'll get there. We're gonna do it. So the next version I'm working on actually takes the video and transcribes from the video, not just the audio, because on the video you've got actually chirons at the bottom, subtitles that say who it is that's speaking. But also ahead of time they publish a PDF kind of order of service, I guess you call it. So passing that in as well, so it knows, okay, Senator Reid will be speaking. This is his role. This is his position. This is how you spell his name. So passing that into the large language model as well gave it a bit of context as to this is what you're about to hear. And because parliamentary sessions follow a specific structure, right? You're discussing a bill. That bill has a particular state. Is it first reading, second reading? Has it gone to the Senate, back again? Trying to take that context in is certainly helpful. The problem I've got at the moment is there's a slight bug, it seems, in Google Gemini that I'm using. Because Google Gemini, because Google own YouTube as well, you can just pass a YouTube URL to it and it will fetch it directly and process it. But it seems to get the time codes off. So I'm trying to, I've reported that to them, I'm trying to get that fixed, because one of the key things I do is send you to the time code in the video where that particular thing is mentioned, and it's drifting off by several minutes. Every half hour it's off by about 5 minutes or so. Yeah, but exactly, local context, trying to give it some local context by giving it the order of service, I think will certainly help it understand at least the names and things like that, if not necessarily the Bayesian vernacular at time. But it does a fairly reasonable job there. So, I mean, you might have noticed actually in the video with Katie, YouTube's by coding rather than vibe coding. She mentioned vibe coding a couple of times. I think it called it by coding and something else. So, yeah. Yeah.
Again, really cool project. I don't want to take away too much time, but the other one on the, I remember what you called it, the one with Coinman.
Yeah.
Very useful.
Yeah, I just had it last week. I was looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. You get in true.com. Yeah.
Really wanted to tap for this one.
Yes.
Yeah. And like I say, it's not updating, so it's a static snapshot at the moment. And like, for instance, Marshalls, virtually everything you find on Marshalls is out of stock, right? Because they've not updated. It's using the sitemap XML from their site, and their sitemap XML hasn't been updated since 2023. So, but
I did have on this one are your concerns for building up more data governance within the region? Companies are going to be more aware of their website-based scrapes and things like that.
So, I'm very much a better ask forgiveness than permission kind of guy, and I hope that kind of, I want to encourage maybe a bit more of that. Maybe hopefully that's not too reckless to say that. Don't sit there and say, well, I need Koeman's permission to do this. Go and do it. If they're going to get upset about it, they're going to get upset about it. I mean, I'm being respectful of their site. I'm not hammering it really hard. I think I'm one request a second. I think it took a week to scrape all of the sites, something along. So I'm doing it fairly slowly, and I think respectfully. If they've got an issue with it, then I mean that would be quite good if they come to me and say, "Hey, look, what are you doing?" And I say, "Well, fix your damn search." So maybe this may grow. Maybe it might turn around and people say, "Well, okay, if we want our stuff to show up on here, then we've got to make sure our site, we've got it on our site." Maybe this might grow and become the almost like the Amazon of Barbados. I don't know. We'll see where it goes. Right, exactly. Yeah. There was a question further back? Yeah.
I had a question. Do you still do the live streaming? Do a workshop on how you use AI to target these APIs and stuff like that?
I don't do the live streaming at the moment, just because the role that I'm in at the moment with GovTech, we're not doing that. But I could do it again, or I'd be happy to do sort of workshops or whatever, or whatever to find out about. Was there a specific thing, sorry, you said about using AI to? Yeah, so I mean, in this case, for you getting through to access this is just using Python and the Python requests library to make an HTTP request to the page and get it. One thing I probably should have said, that this site is, and actually we outside 246, almost entirely coded via Claude Code and AI driven coding, right? So pretty much, I think I wrote maybe 2 lines of code in this by hand. Almost this entire thing was written by me instructing it. Now, you need to kind of know what you're doing, and by having a background, I can kind of understand and see, and it will produce a huge plan, and I would interrogate it, and we would build a plan together, and then go ahead and execute it. But yeah, so it's using the request library to go and fetch it. For We Outside 246, you can't get directly to Instagram. Their API doesn't let you get a hold of the posts. So I'm using a third party called Apify that I use, and they can scrape Instagram. It's a paid service, and it took me a while to try and optimize that to make sure I'm not, blowing a huge hole in my wallet every month. And so I actually did some optimization on that to get it down a bit sort of cheaper. Yeah. Do I plan to monetize them? Maybe. I haven't got direct plans to monetize them yet, and I think in some ways that's allowed me to just go ahead and build it because I've not been worried about the commercial side, if that makes sense. And if this fails, it fails, right? And that's kind of what I want people to do, is to experiment and just build something. Just build it, because don't sit there and have to think, well, do I need a whole business plan behind this? I don't know how I'd monetize it. I mean, it could be like a stick adverts on it, or for this one, for example, I could say, hey, Koeman, if you want to show up higher, you pay me a bit of money, or whatever. I don't know. There's various things we could see. I've got some ideas for some other sites that may have a bit more of a direct monetization route within them. But yeah, I'm not worried too much about it. Again, mostly it was scratching my own itch. It's like I'm trying to redecorate my house. I couldn't find anything, and so I sat down one evening. I'm like, this is ridiculous, right? Okay, let's fix this. And so this whole site, yeah, just to say, this whole site took me 2 days to build with Claude Code, right? That's not to say it's going to take 2 days for everybody to build. I'm also not trying to say I'm a genius builder or anything, but it's just like, with a lot of the AI coding tools now, you can really rapidly get something up and going and test an idea, right? If this fails, well, this is 2 days worth of my time. Okay, it's not 2 months or 2 years of my time, right? I think marrying the two. I mean, I think there's definitely areas you can get to without necessarily knowing it, and knowing what you're doing. My daughter Katie, who's in the video there, did another site called Dayweave that allows you to say, hey, I've got 3 hours, I'm in Toronto, what do I do? And it produced a whole itinerary. She produced that with very little coding experience and built that up. But it definitely helps if you know what the tool is trying to do, so you could spot, okay, that's going to not work. So my typical approach, I use Claude Code a lot, and I get it to plan everything out first with me, and I can look at it and go, okay, I know that's not going to work because of this, and this. If I didn't do that, it might go off down a rabbit hole that I'm not aware of. So I would say a hybrid approach. Any other questions? No? Okay, well, thank you very much. And if you want to chat, I'm around. So